Welcome to our second debate. I'm Sudarshan Suresh, I'm a PhD student at Carnegie Mellon.
And I'm Monroe. I'm from the ICRA. So for our next topic, we'll venture into the realm of social justice and utility of what we do. So, lots of us as roboticists like to play with toys, robots, algorithms, which should or shouldn't be published as open source code, as we said just before. But there's always that fear that those could be misused in various ways. So that there are a lot of discussions around military usage of robotics and AI that popped up over the last years. But our research potentially has impacts in other areas, many areas: industry, daily life, healthcare, care of elderly people. And it's often said that robotics should or maybe will replace jobs that are dull, dirty, and dangerous, which is a concept often known as the theory of robotics. What we're trying to settle today is, what are the social impacts of such evolutions? Is it positive? So this is the question that we're going to debate now. And more specifically, the question today, if Federico can share the slide, is research in robotics is intrinsically a social good because we seek to solve the dull, dirty, and dangerous stuff. So before we begin our debate, we're going to have to ask you to go to Slido and vote on whether you agree or not. So there is a link and a QR code popping up. So please go and vote whether you agree or not. So this is a pre-debate poll which is open right now. Okay, so while you're voting, we'll introduce the debaters. So to argue in favor of this resolution, we have as a remote attendant Professor Ayoung Kim, who is since September 2021 an associate professor in mechanical engineering at Seoul National University. Before that, she was at the Korean Institute of Science and Technology for 7 years. And even before that, she obtained her PhD in mechanical engineering from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. She's leading the Robust Perception and Mobile Robotics Lab, and her research interests are perceptual robotics autonomy for navigation and spatial representation learning. Also, on the foresight, we have here in the room Professor Monroe Kennedy, who is an assistant professor of mechanical engineering at Stanford University, where he leads the ARM lab, so the Assistive Robotics and Manipulation Lab. He received his master's and his PhD in mechanical engineering and applied mechanics from UPenn, so he kind of has a home field advantage in this room, actually. And his expertise is in collaborative robotics, specifically development of theoretical and experimental approaches to enhance robotic autonomy and robotic effectiveness in decentralized tasks towards human-robot collaboration. I'll hand over to Sue for the against moderators.
Awesome, thank you. So for against here we have Professor Aaron Dollar. Aaron Dollar is a professor of mechanical engineering and computer science at Yale University, where he serves as the lead investigator of the Graph Lab. He earned a BS in mechanical engineering at UMass Amherst, an SM and PhD degrees at Harvard, and a postdoc at MIT, and is a recipient of a number of awards, including the Young Investigator Award from the AFO-SR, DARPA, NASA, and the NSF Career Award. His research focuses on robotic grasping and manipulation, electronics, assistive devices, prosthetics, and other actuated systems. So that's a mouthful. On the against team, also joining him, we have Professor Giuseppe Loianno, who leads the Agile Robotics and Perception Lab at New York University. Prior to NYU, he was a lecturer, research scientist, and team leader at the Grasp Lab at UPenn, which seems to be a recurring theme here. He received his BSc and MSc degrees in automation engineering from the University of Naples, and also later a PhD in computer engineering and robotics. His research interests are in field robotics, in the field of control, perception, sensor fusion, navigation, and mapping in unstructured environments, specifically for microwave vehicles. And finally, we have the longtime friend of the ICRA Debates program, Professor John Kelly here as our moderator. John has been part of the debates since its inception, either in an organizing capacity and is currently a member of the advisory committee. He's an assistant professor at the University of Toronto Institute of Aerospace Studies and the director of Space and Terrestrial Autonomous Robotic Systems, or STARSAT. He completed his PhD at the University of California under the supervision of Professor Douglas Bachman. His research is focused on robust multi-sensor perception for safe long-term operation in challenging environments. So with that, and no further ado, I'll give it up to John to take this over.
Okay, thanks everyone. Great to be here. Welcome to everyone online. So we're going to start the session with opening arguments from each side. That's 4 debaters, 5 minutes each. We just want to keep it clean, folks. So I've always wanted to say, let's get ready to rumble. So it should be good. So we'll begin on the 4 side, and that will be with Ayoung. Kim, if you have 5 minutes to tell us your proposition on the 4 side, please go ahead.
Okay, you hope you can hear me okay? So, okay, so I think the robotics research is intrinsically good for social good because many researches oriented to comfort human, for example, autonomous cars, like drone deliveries or robot vacuum cleaners. Those are for all the comforts, but more originally, I think the final goal or the final or ultimate goal of what all robot researchers want to achieve is that more at the automating some hard and dangerous stuff. I think the reason why I kind of support on that direction is maybe because of my research experience. The first one is when I was doing my PhD, I work on automating a robot for the ship hull inspection. And usually the ship needs to be periodically checked by underwater operators. And that's actually quite difficult job for humans to do because the human divers can only go up to maybe 30 meters in underwater. And if you want to go beyond that, it's very dangerous for humans to do. But many infrastructures are actually in underwater. And we need to inspect them and maintain them, and somebody has to do it. It's a very difficult job and also dangerous. If we can make the robots do that for us, that'll be really good. And the second experience that I have is during my when I was working as a assistant professor at the KAIST, at the civil engineering department, where we try to deploy the robots for the construction, site management, or many infrastructure inspections. Those jobs are also very dangerous, and I saw some hopes in kind of ultimate goal that we wanted to achieve toward that direction. So that's why I think on direction. The second reason is because I think we have different ability between human and robot. Like, for example, humans are really good at doing some more abstract job than the robot, but human feels very tired easily, and we feel difficulty for very dull and repeated and tedious jobs. But that's what the robots are really good at, I think. So I think in that sense, we have some complementary aspect in our abilities. So I think because of that fact, I think the robot can do really nice job for human by taking some jobs from dangerous and dirty and those stuff. I think I know some way the robot could be exploited in very dangerous way against the humans' comfort. But I think that's not the fault of the robotics researchers, but that's at the part of where the portion where when we use it. So in that sense, that's about the some policy and political issues. That I think that we can, if we can separate, think about it separately, and only thinking about more original research aspect. I think I would love to go for support this direction. Yep, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Excellent. All right, so now we'll switch over to the against side, and perhaps we'll ask Professor Dollar to chime in on his opinions for 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So every winter, what?
I think it's audible here.
Yeah, it's very loud. Sorry. All right. Every winter, I get in the mood to do a Lord of the Rings marathon. The extended edition, mind you, much better. And yes, these are 12 hours long, and yes, I do it every winter. And this year I was watching, and I was particularly noticing the scene where Sauron, the big evil eye, has called all of his armies to him from across the globe, and was starting to enter the battlefield, and all of the forces of good, the woodland elves and the hobbits are there on the battlefield, and at some point they hear a rumble, and they look up and see this enormous beast, a giant elephant with tusks, that's 50 stories high. The hobbits are like, soiling their little pantaloons, whatever. And it occurred to me, this beast, there's a big savage driving it, he's lashed to the thing, crazy eyes, muscular, driving it, swinging it one way, swinging it another, wiping out, a horde of elves, a couple of trees on this side. And on the back are a bunch of the savages, kind, the other humans and whatnot. And it occurred to me that this is a great analogy, of course, for the debate topic that we're discussing. And if it's not clear to you, I'll go into it a little more in detail. But this giant elephant-like beast that the savage is controlling, and this is automation. The controller of this beast, right? His name is capitalism. He's steering the giant automation beast to wipe out the forces of good, crush, pieces of the planet with every step, consuming all of the, natural environment around it, and riding on this beast named automation is humankind, and in particular, humans in the developing world, where we are going along with the ride, we're with our kinfolk, we're enjoying the benefits of this beast, consuming the planet, but nonetheless, we are there riding it, and we're consuming the planet at the benefit of, or due to the ability of automation and robotics to speed consumption, make it easier and faster and cheaper for us to eat and consume the planet as we go. That's all I have to say.
Wow, okay. That's the first Lord of the Rings related analogy.
Really?
Yeah, in the debates. This is fantastic.
Wow.
Spicy. All right. Okay, so in response, Monroe Kennedy on the foresight might have some counter arguments to share for 5 minutes.
I don't have any movie references.
That's okay. It's all right.
So I have 4 points I'd like to make. Thinking about intrinsic versus intended good, I'm limited to coexistence and improved quality of life. So thinking collaboration versus replacement. I'm going to touch on the cost of progress is change. And then finally thinking about realism and its importance about the next step. So kind of jumping in, the statement itself, I want to defend, but I have a really big issue with the word intrinsic. Because if you imply that it's intrinsically good, This absolves roboticists from having to think about or take responsibility for negative impact that you might have, right? And so I think it's really important to understand that, for example, if you take bridges, right? Bridges have great positive social impact, but they're not intrinsically good. You have to put a lot of effort into making them safe for society, right? Even though they may be well intended. So likewise, I think, robotics is like most engineering, right? Humanities is trying to, go forward as a species, and this is a really big stepping stone. We have to be very careful as we do that we may intend good, but that is not intrinsic, so we don't absolve ourselves from responsibility. The second is, coexistence and improved quality of life. So I think over the years, as robotics was continuing to develop, right, we were doing a lot of automation, and then autonomy, and then multi-robot systems and teams. And so we're able to address a lot of these dull, dirty, and dangerous tasks. And I believe a lot of those positions and jobs may, be useful for robots to do. And I think a big concern in society at large is this sort of fear of replacement. But I think if you look at the entire human experience, what you might find is that there are many other spaces beyond those dull, dirty, and dangerous tasks where there's a great paradigm for robots working alongside people. We're making them more capable to exist in human-based environments. So what would a society look like where these robots would be effective teammates existing with us and give us that brighter tomorrow, taking away those dangerous things, but yet improving, the world that we want to live in with robotics. Next is, kind of coming straight from that is that the cost of progress is change, right? If someone says, I don't want to, change the job I do, I like doing the shoveling of this, very dull task, maybe I want to continue that. But we've seen this actually, in our society already twice, that you can point your finger to, in terms of the Industrial Revolution, where, you have workers transitioning from farms to factories in the, 1760 to like, the early 1800s, or the Second Industrial Revolution as well. And if you actually look at the job market today, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the US in 2020, there are over 185,000 jobs that require programming experience. So we see ourselves on a verge of yet another revolution, but we've been here before, right? So the real task becomes, can we have government and other resources help retrain and re-educate society so that they can move easier into this new age that we find ourselves in. And finally, I'll speak to just, realism versus pessimism, right? So if you're pessimistic, right, I think it actually inhibits you from imagining a better world. Realism says that to be successful in this space, it's really important that you understand the risks that are involved and take careful steps to realize the world that you want to see.
Excellent, very strong. Makes sense. So the statistics to back it up too. So excellent. Okay, so we will now turn it over to Giuseppe Loianno to follow up that argument.
Great. So I'm definitely against the statement, and I start with the picking up on what Monroe said about intrinsically. So I think that's that's not the right word. That's completely wrong, in my opinion. Maybe I'm a bit exaggerating, but I want to touch base on, let's say, three main points that makes me feel that I'm against this kind of statement. The first one is on the usability, on how people. The second one is on how people perceive this kind of machine, and on the third one is on the safety aspects of these vehicles and robots. So the first one is usability. So there are two kinds of aspects here to take into account. So the first one is, it's always, we try to make certain things for good, try to do our best to, solve complex problems. That's our role. But certainly that we cannot control everyone in the world. So we may find someone that just, it's just crazy mind and intends to use this kind of machine for a different purpose than the good of the society. The second problem is that it's related on the usability is, we try to make robots that solve these problems, but at the same time, they're very difficult to use. So when you go into this kind of field, basically these robots kind of, the success rate, probably the real world deployment is still at an extremely lower rate, and it depends, many aspects that, the research, but also on robustness and so on. There is another aspect that's related to how people perceive these machines. So if you think about firefighters in New York City, they are starting to, they want to use drones and so on. But at the same time, they have concerns from other folks that are not in the tech unit that this is stealing jobs. So so you need to find a way to give the possibility to people to explain or motivate the usefulness and also if it is useful the deployment of this machine and some people may think it's just they're taking jobs and you need to find counter arguments on the aspect that are convincing for these people. And then the last aspect is related to safety. So I think it's safety both for end user, but also for people that are deploying it. So you may basically run into corner cases that also relate a little bit to robustness, basically. So the deployment in the real world, that basically there is a failure, and then the person or the objects or the surrounding environment that you're trying to explore basically gets affected by this by the failure of the robot, which can cause if you have a drone, you have a LiPo battery, that there might be a fire, or there might be some other kinds of problems related to the personal safety, but also for the person that is deploying the robot. That might be difficult because you may run into issue that the person loses control or the operation doesn't work, and at that point it can make also the person feel uncomfortable in using this kind of device in the future.
Okay, thank you. Excellent opening arguments. All right. So now we'll move on to, we have about 15 or 16 minutes for some moderated discussion about the points that were just raised. And so I will check the online chat, but just before I do that, actually, one thing to mention, there are a couple of posts in the chat right now that have taken issue with the word intrinsically, so I'm interested in Monroe brought it up as well. what exactly intrinsically means, and so that's actually just going to make a touch on that in a moment. What I did want to bring up first, and maybe I'll call on Aaron first, and then Monroe, and also Ayoung and Giuseppe right afterwards. So there was an interesting point raised where Monroe said the cost of progress has changed, and Aaron noted that we are riding the capitalist beast, out the Lord of the Rings. So, Aaron, maybe do you have any comments on whether we need to ride the capitalist beast to change that will ultimately result in things getting better, or is it just going to go? Are we going to end up with Sauron or something? And take it away.
No. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we need to ride the beast. Obviously, technology and the history of technology has gotten us quite a ways from our hunter-gathering past, and you could argue whether we are better off now than as hunter-gatherers, but certainly a lot of aspects of our lives have improved. We're now able to inhabit areas of the planet that we could not previously. Yeah, I think that, I mean, the change has been for the good of humans. I don't think I'm going to argue that point so much, but I think it has come at an unnecessary and enormous cost. It's allowed us to, expand our population to 8 billion or something. We're about 8 billion now, right? We're all keenly aware of the problems with climate change and so forth. That's really due to the emissions caused by consuming the planet and using its energy and not caring for it so much. So yeah, I think change has happened and has been very good, but I don't really believe that most of us on the planet are in need of much more positive change. I mean, there's always inequality and things that happen and can be improved, but as a species, compared to other species, at least on the planet, human beings are pretty much all set.
Okay, also, okay, Monroe, would you counter that? Change is both necessary and, progress is necessary, I should say. Further progress is necessary, and we have to change, and capitalism be damned.
I think, particularly, existing in a capitalist society, I think the main thing here is the way things work is what's the priority? That's the question, right? If healthcare is not a priority, then there's disparity. If you look at countries where it is a priority and there is that kind of thing, usually, money, capitalism is a modality that expresses or is an expression of the priorities of that society, right? So I think, if you actually look back at, again, I look at our history and say, think about power, we moved from coal to fission, and we're on the brink, I think, hopefully, fusion, right? You sometimes have to pass through these regions, hopefully quickly, right, to get to where you want to be. And you can't get there without investment. I think if you look at, funding that has traditionally been the case for academics over the past, 30 plus years, way back in the day, it was primarily government, NSF funding, but now you see companies realizing the value of a lot of research and putting their own money behind that, sometimes even looking far ahead, right? Even beyond what their current needs are, realizing that these problems will have significant social and business impact. So I think priority is the question, right? How can we make, the things that you're doing, that there is social good in them, they need to be a priority. And if they are a priority, then hopefully you can find money to back that up. And where is the money? Right? Is the money all in government? Is the money in companies that are taking social responsibility? So if they are, and we hope they are, and we've been asking them to, then this is a perfect expression of that. And the question is, can we find a stable ecosystem that works? And as far as, thinking about, the consuming of, the planet, I think it's absolutely very important, thing. And I always don't necessarily equate capitalism to that kind of destruction of Earth. I think, again, if I go back to the coal, fusion, fission, right, there's definitely, a scenario where there's irresponsibility, but take responsibility. I think we can decouple capitalist goals from planetary destruction. I think that that's a very important distinction to make. And as I think academics and front thinkers in this space, I think it's part of us to start those discussions on how technology should be moving in a positive way. We hope and think and want it to, so we can have that net global positive impact.
Thank you. Excellent response. All right. Okay, so maybe I'll just shift gears slightly, not to not give Ayoung or Giuseppe a chance to chime in on that, but Giuseppe raised an important point, and Ayoung also alluded to it about safety of these systems. So maybe if Giuseppe wants to comment, dull, dirty, dangerous, perhaps good, but is it too much of a risk? Maybe.
Yeah, it's too much of a risk from two perspectives. So your system may just, be not robust enough for this kind of operation and make things worse. Imagine you are expecting a breach and you're trying to inspect and your drone crashes and then you have fire after that. So what do you do with it? So you were trying to do something good, and then after a bit, that's something that it's worse than before. And the second thing, it's safety related to the how do we make this system intrinsically safe? So this system, anyone can try to install something on it, or do a remote access and try to trick the system, try to insert some malware inside, and then the functionalities then are completely switched. And how do you prevent this kind of this kind of events happening? And I don't think we're yet there. There is lots of research to be done, and there is always someone, where capitalist work, there's always someone that's, may try to do that for his own financial advantages. And, at the end, we need to find ways to protect and make this machine safer and better. It's not only, about ethics, but it's also how we intrinsically at this point make them safer and, much more reliable and not accessible to, and intrinsically basically preventing the ability to do wrong actions.
Okay, excellent. Ayoung, if you have comments on the for side, do you think we're safe enough, especially for dull, dirty, dangerous, or have we already achieved that bar?
Yeah, I think the COVID has some effect on that part, especially for worldwide. We couldn't really secure some job position because like shops are closing suddenly and things are so changing. And for that part, I think the robotics research has proven some possibilities, like how to keep some safety for the society, but at the same time, not really damaging the humans' work or the life. Like for example, the serving at the shops or some restaurants where human cannot work as a server, robot could replace some of the work, but having the managers who is safely working inside the restaurants, but interfacing with the clients with the robots, that has proven some of the possibility. I know there are some many things we have to work on to improve, especially like security issue, that kind of thing. We should definitely work on that. But I think we have some possibility. It proved the possibility in that sense.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, so I'm just popping over to the chat and poll now. I'm not quite able to take all of the questions, but there were some actual great ones. So maybe we'll I'm going to switch over to Giuseppe actually against Science. There's one important comment in chat amongst many that says effectively, if you have robots that are doing dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs, are you displacing individuals from, and is it better to have robots doing the dull, dirty, dangerous stuff and people having no jobs at all? Or should we keep the robots doing the dull, dirty, dangerous stuff? So effectively, like, is it worth sacrificing jobs in the near term?
I don't think we're sacrificing jobs here. We're just, redefining competencies. So maybe someone that before was doing some kind of, job that was, repetitive, now it's not going to do that job anymore, but it's going to do some more technical level job to maybe fix the robot if, or an algorithm if the algorithm breaks or if the robot breaks. I mean, so that's what I honestly believe. Of course, to do that, you need to invest in human resources. So that means that you need to try to, invest in new kind of, ways of giving these people new background, new competencies to address this kind of, let's say, different problems. Maybe they are happier as well because they don't do anymore the same thing over and over, but they just learn something new.
Perhaps we'll turn it over to Monroe just to be an advocate for progress.
So I think to that very point, right? Whenever I'm teaching my students about robotics, I always start them off with the overall mission of our field, which I believe is to improve human life, right? So if you're not improving people's lives, then described what we came to do. So if someone's life is at risk, in a dangerous task, my goal to improve their life is to eliminate or mitigate their risk. I think the second piece here is, particularly for the dull aspect, can also be efficiency. So, I'm trying to figure out a perfect way to work in vertical farming, which is very exciting to me. You can use artificial intelligence to help actually magnify the amount of food you can make and possibly open up new avenues on the planet where you can grow and provide that type of food. If AI robotics is able to actually serve as a big stepping stone toward addressing something like world hunger, which is efficiency and handling something that could be potentially dull and dirty, then why not, right? Why not take that step forward that has that positive impact? And so, thinking about displacing an individual versus not doing something at all, I think, again, people aren't going anywhere. We're here, right? The question is, what are we doing with our time? I bring up in some of my talks Star Trek. All the students don't know anything about the series. It makes me very sad. But growing up, I love to watch Star Trek, particularly like the Next Generation. They paint a picture. Our life follows art. They paint a picture of a society where there may not be these types of issues in terms of like food and things like that. We want to move toward this type of immensely positive society. We need to think about those steps that we need to take, and then possibly even one day redefining what it means to be human. You don't have to do the dull, dirty, and dangerous thing. You can spend your time doing what you love.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to take one more question that's been uploaded in the chat, quite a bit actually, and maybe we'll start with Ayoung. It's a question of accessibility. Arguing on the foresight, dull, dirty, dangerous. The question in the chat is, robots seem to remain only accessible to people who can afford them, and not those who are really most in need of the technology. So if we're only able to do dull, dirty, dangerous things for people who can afford to offload to robots, is that okay, or do we need to do more to perhaps balance the equation?
Yeah, so that's actually a good point. I actually had this argument with a taxi driver when I was traveling to somewhere, and he was asking if the autonomous driving is on the world, and he will be losing the job, and he was talking about that kind of thing. But during the conversation with him, we realized that like long time ago, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 years ago, there was a job who was, I wanted to call somebody, I have to call to some kind of center, and there was a lot of people working. And if I say them, I want to maybe call to University of Pennsylvania, and he or she changed the number somehow and connects to the person, like connector. I don't know the exact name of that job, but we don't do that anymore. So what I want to say is, like, for now, at instant time, those accessibility might be more to reach people. But like gradually in the end, like an infrastructure and a service, like for the community, like a phone call, it's a kind of system that now everybody uses, and we don't think that job is needed anymore. So I think eventually the robots will be more gradually accessible to people, like in the restaurant or some services, not only to the rich people. But I see the point why the question like this came up, because now the robot vacuum cleaners or the robot service robots are quite expensive. But I think if that is part of the infrastructure, and I know people are trying to develop some kind of market that rent the robot to customers or restaurants or some facilities. So I think there will be some kind of things like that will be developed in the future to alleviate this kind of issue. That's what I think.
Okay, thank you. So this brings up a great opportunity for Aaron to chime in about the potential evils of capitalism and the fact that maybe this will never trickle down, and only the rich will have access to offloading.
I'd just like to start by agreeing with the poster that everything that Ayoung and Cameron has said, Monroe, has said is completely wrong. Yes, I'm full agreement of that. But no, really, yeah, it is a problem, and I do think that here in the developed world, we are, sitting and getting fatter and fatter on the backs of our robots and automation and so forth, while the rest of the world, gets more and more unequal. I don't think capitalism is necessarily going to swing in the way that's going to help address this. I'm not exactly sure how this should happen, but yeah, in some way, I feel like, if you really want to conserve the planet, I mean, if you sit here and think about the standard of living that we have here as rich Westerners, and think about trying to bring the rest of the world up to this standard, it's going to require consuming much more of the planet. And in some way, the only way we're going to really reach equality, if that's the goal, is to somehow reduce our standards of living. And maybe robots can make things more efficient and so forth. I'm not, despite the tough stance I have here, I'm not 100% against robots. I am a robotics researcher. But yeah, I think we're going to have to, start to live more humbly in order for this to work. But I'm not, policy and making these things work in that kind of way are really complicated. I'm not sure if that's going to
Okay, thank you. Just before we turn it over to Monroe for a response, this does remind me of the movie WALL-E a little bit. WALL-E. Maybe, hopefully, we're not heading in that direction too soon. Monroe, you got a response?
Yeah, I think, just because of the city that we're in, I think this is a particularly contextual good point here that, at the University of Pennsylvania, for those who are here, you can go to I think it's the Levine or Skurkanix building. There's a floor to ceiling computer. It's the ENIAC computer. It's one of the first ones. My mother actually studied here at Penn in the electrical engineering department back in the day, and she remembers having to have a punch card get in, and everyone had just a little bit of time on these really big machines. Today, I have a computer that is more powerful than that in my pocket. And today, in most countries, you may not have the resources. Most people actually have a computer that is more powerful than the original ENIAC in their pocket. So I think it all comes back again to priorities, and can we move forward and not put our energy in the right places so we can solve these problems and make it accessible? I think it just sets an interesting precedent that this is something we can do, and it's mind-boggling to think that this has all happened on the span of time that it actually has. So if we continue to make these advances, we might be looking at this sort of exponential increase rate, and it may not take as long as we think for many of these advances to become accessible, particularly if we prioritize accessibility in our research questions.
Okay, excellent. We'll then turn it over to Giuseppe to respond potentially to the prospect of making things accessible.
Yeah, I think it's all a matter of priority. Moreover, just saying we're in our pocket device that's more powerful than ENIAC that's in the past. So, but this device has a cost, right? So if people can afford this kind of device, maybe they can afford a robot, right? So I mean, basically, what I'm gonna say is that people have to redefine their priorities. We're again in this capitalist world, and people like commodities. So maybe they at some point they need to realize that it's there needs to be an investment in this area, and they buy a robot. I mean, let's be honest, the robot are now $200-300 maybe. They're gonna become cheaper and particularly you see the Amazon problem. So basically, I am against this statement that it's only accessible only to and what I'm saying is that it's if people can afford the phone, definitely they can afford the robot, at least the mobile one, basically. So then, of course, I mean, if you want to solve bigger issues, then it's another economy of scale. But at that point, you don't need to compare anymore population, but you need to start to compare at the macro level. That's countries, basically, and that's different story.
Okay, yeah, very good point. Excellent. Okay, so we're just at the end of the moderated discussion. Thanks for all the excellent discussion points raised on both sides. So now we'll move to the closing remarks. That's 2.5 minutes for each debater, and we'll go in the same order that we started with. So, Ayoung, if you'd like to close for 2.5 minutes with your final thoughts.
Okay. Yeah. It was great to participate in this kind of debate. It's first time for me to joining this kind of debate. It was very fun, and I really like some of the words from Aaron, the Hobbit, and it was fun. But I think I know it's kind of a sword with the two faces. Like it could harm people, but at the same time it could advance people, good for people. It's the sword, like the same expression that around it. It's the human who's riding on that elephant. So it's the human who will be using the robot, and we will be the one who decide how to use this robot in the society and how we can make the robot accessible to more people and make it work as a good for the human. So I will be working, I think, as a robot researcher, I will be working toward this ultimate goal to make the robot to solve some hard work for us, doing the dull, dirty, dangerous job for us. That's what I hope the robot to achieve and for the human to achieve. Yeah, and that's it. I think it was a great time to participate in this debate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, Aaron, you have 2.5 minutes to share your final opinions on the your argument side.
Thank you. So I was watching Dune recently, and yeah, to stay on the against side, I guess it's a convenient and nice idea to think about robots doing the dull, dirty, and dangerous side of things. I'm not so sure that we really should be automating the dull and the dirty tasks. Dangerous, there's much more of an argument along those lines. But I think it has been, primarily in the service of making people more and more comfortable. And I don't think we necessarily need to be more comfortable. I think we have, as much as we need. And so we just have to make sure that at some point we become Legolas and we jump up, on the tusk of the giant beast, and we slay the capitalist driver, and we take control again of the beast and make sure it doesn't destroy the remaining parts of the planet that it hasn't already destroyed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Although I must say, I kind of like those pods at Wally that if you're around from anyway. Okay, Monroe, final thoughts on the force side for 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, so I think thinking toward our original statement, I think again it's the replacing intrinsic with intended social good. I think the questions we as researchers need to ask ourselves are: who will our work impact, and will the performance of our work be equitable for those who are impacted? So this is very close to problem searching. You're asking who cares when I do any type of research, and you think about who this will impact. Will the performance be based on, for instance, protected characteristics of those individuals? So how can you make sure that there's equity in the way that it performs and that it's having that net social good. So the follow-up part to that is then to say, as researchers, we need to be thinking about what stage of our research should we begin taking responsibility for its potential impact. And I think the answer to that is as early as possible. And if the end use is unknown, then those who could potentially be affected should be considered. And the last piece is, I think research and social impact is not an open loop problem, it's a closed loop problem. Right? We do our best to anticipate how they'll be used and that impact, and we do our best to make that as positive as possible, and then we put that forward and it has use that could be positive or negative, and then as researchers we close the loop and robustify that to hopefully increase and maximize the social good that our systems were intended to have.
Okay, Giuseppe, on the against side.
Yeah, so just to still be on the against side, the main issue is that this kind of system are definitely intrinsically not safe. So you can't really use them for doing this kind of operations of dirty and dangerous stuff. They are intrinsically not safe for different reasons. So the first one is basically that they have some failure cases so they cannot solve everything. So this can put in danger both the end user and also the person that are actually operating them, and then they can basically there are ways that people can use in bad ways this kind of system, and we're already seeing it. And or they can simply, they are running very well, but at some point someone hacks the system, and then it becomes, a sort of, a weapon. So it's something that's not proper. And so that's basically, I don't think that we are at the stage yet that we can claim that these robots are intrinsically made for good and solving this kind of dirty things. And it's both on, we need to work both on the ethics, and we need also to work on the aspects that are related to making this system intrinsically, technically safe.
Okay, excellent. Very strong points on both sides. All right, so we have two more pieces to the format this afternoon now. So the first thing we'll do is we'll get an update on the audience poll. So I think the organizers will.
Yeah, Federico is doing it back. So once it's there, yeah.
Okay, would you folks like me to read the poll results? Okay, all right. So.
No, he'll share.
Oh, okay, super. About 5 minutes for polling updates. We'll see how if anything changed as a result.
And we can do the debrief like simultaneously.
Okay, sure. Do you want to start the simultaneous? Okay, so this is the fun part. Hopefully it was all fun. But so now, obviously we had two opposing sides. Now we have about 15 or 20 minutes for folks to share their true thoughts on this. And so we'll go maybe in reverse order. So Giuseppe, if you want to start.
Sure. Of course, we work to make this machine accessible to everyone, starting from a research perspective as well. If you think about it, we are trying to most of the work in our community is open source. So this is a way, in my opinion, to make these kind of things, not preventing anyone about using them in the right way. We try always in our work to stress that the usage is especially for mobile robots that I'm working on, but also for industrial robots, basically to solve complex problems. That's the ultimate goal. And we need to find ways, to convince people, especially non-educated people, on how this can be beneficial for the community and for the life of people. And these robots are not stealing the definite job; they are just making things better. And it's a way that people will redefine their competency. So it's not about the robot is now being the server in the restaurant. I lost my job. No, I probably do something else. that's probably, more stimulating as well, rather than, going back and forth and repetitive tasks. So that's my main opinion on this aspect.
Okay, thank you. So what I think I'm hearing is that although you argued very successfully against, you are actually a 4 category person on the 4 side. Excellent. So well done, sir. Good poker face. I remind me not to play poker against you. All right. Monroe, do you want to share your thoughts?
I think I'm pretty aligned with everything I had to say. It came straight from my heart.
Okay, so no further. Yeah, no, it's excellent. Stats. I had a feeling that you might be actually arguing for the side you felt strongly about in the real world. Actually, all right. Okay, thank you very much, Aaron. I'm hoping there's another analogy to a film.
I like movies. No, I do think that there has been a lot of positive aspects of robotics, and many of us are working on things that do actually have a lot of good to society and medicine and all kinds of aspects of things. I am against in certain ways because I do feel like automation, it really does speed our ability to consume, making things cheaper and faster and so on and so forth, which isn't an intrinsic bad, but certainly has a lot of potential to be that. At the very least, it removes us from seeing those direct impacts to the planet, even one step further, as we move out of these more manual, hands-on types of roles. We can sit in our air-conditioned homes or our Wall-E little chairs and so forth, and really be completely out of touch with what's really happening down at the bottom level. And I think there's a big danger there. We can order pretty much anything with one touch of our phone, and we are only getting that because we're going to have robots who will be filling those orders for us because we're doing so much of it that there's not enough labor in order to do those kinds of things. So I think there's an intrinsic problem there. If we don't even have enough people to fulfill our consumption needs and require automation to do it, we're riding.
Excellent, very, very good. So it's almost you're straddling the fence, I would say. But very, very well said. Very well said. Okay, Ayoung, any thoughts on your true position on the topic?
Yeah, actually, I used to be on the 4 side, but these days it's very sad to see things easily go to the bad side easier than the good side that people actually did. But I hope at the end, maybe 20 years later or 30 years, 10 or 20 years later, I hope that people say, oh yeah, 20 years ago, human had to probe and like that, thinking because I think the driving itself maybe can be considered as a dull job when the autonomous driving is become a common. So I was actually in neutral side these days, but I want to go for 4 side in the rest of my research career. Yep. Thanks.
Excellent. Okay, well said. We do have just a few more minutes, so I was actually just going to touch on one thing just before we do this. Sorry, Karthik's telling me, just before we do the polling results. There was something that Monroe mentioned actually. It's been in the chat and it's been upvoted. The word intrinsically that we had in the topic. Is that the right word? And if not, I think Monroe suggested changing it. What would you change it to? So just open dialogue for anyone who wants to take a stab.
Perhaps intended.
Okay, so maybe intrinsically implies things that we may not necessarily want to imply. Intrinsically is maybe a loaded term that we should reconsider. Okay, excellent. So I think we can now move on to the poll results and see if the sides were swayed in either direction. Oh, and now I have to interpret these plots. Okay. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so before, okay, so before we had 41% disagreeing and 29% agreeing on the for side. And then, so after, wow, we have a stronger.
Was that Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, it seems like Lord of the
Reading the
Rings.
language of the audience.
Lord of the Rings and Dune have won out. That's very interesting. Okay, so yeah, very interesting results. So thanks to everyone in the audience who voted. I will note that we didn't lose. Interestingly, we didn't lose too much of the agree folks potentially. What happened is that it seems like you swayed the undecided voters. Interesting. You guys consider politics. next year, next time, yeah, next election. That's right. It's coming up. All right. So, excellent. Okay, so I think that's we're just a little bit ahead of schedule, which is fantastic. So, I'd love to thank all of the debaters. Thank you so much for taking the time and for the great both analogies and very cognizant arguments for the for and the against side. It's always hard to argue for something when you may be feeling internally conflicted. So we appreciate it. And just as a note, this is the second debate. Today, there is one more coming up at 2 p.m. Right? So we'll take a 1 hour, just a little more than a 1 hour lunch break. And then please do come back either in person or online for the last debate of ICRA 2022. All right. So thanks again. We can just give everyone a clap.